When Kevin Costner sailed across post-apocalyptic seas in Waterworld, audiences worldwide marveled at his futuristic Trimaran. But the real story behind this iconic vessel is stranger than fiction. From Boeing 747 cargo flights to sandbag-powered transformations, hidden helmsmen operating joysticks below deck, and a decades-long journey from Hollywood prop to championship racing yacht, this boat's behind-the-scenes tale rivals any blockbuster plot. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about Waterworld's Trimaran. Fact 1. Built from a champion's mold. When Universal Pictures needed a Trimaran for Waterworld, they didn't just want any boat. They wanted one that could actually sail and look believable on camera as a high-speed vessel in a post-apocalyptic world. So they turned to VPLP Design, a French naval architecture firm that had just made headlines in the sailing world. The timing couldn't have been more perfect because just months before production began, French sailor Florence Arthaud had won the 1994 Route du Rhum race aboard a Trimaran called Pierre Premier, which translates to Pierre I in English. This wasn't just any race. The Route du Rhum is one of the most prestigious solo transatlantic sailing competitions in the world, and Arthaud's victory had put VPLP's design in the international spotlight. Instead of designing a completely new boat from scratch, VPLP and the production team made a fascinating decision. They would use the exact same molds that had been used to build Pierre Premier. This meant that Waterworld's Trimaran would essentially be a twin of a real championship-winning racing yacht. The molds were located at Jeannot Techniques Avancées, the advanced technology division of Jeannot, under the direction of Bruno Belmont. Using these proven molds gave the production team several advantages. They knew the design was seaworthy and fast. They could save time on engineering and testing, and they would have a boat that looked authentic to anyone who knew anything about high-performance sailing vessels. Both versions of the Trimaran built for the film were 60 feet long and came directly from those Pierre Premier molds. The sailing community took notice of this connection, and it added an extra layer of credibility to the film's boat that most moviegoers probably never realized. While one Trimaran was modified heavily with special effects gadgets and transforming mechanisms, and the other was built purely for speed and actual sailing shots, they both started life as genetic twins of a real-world racing champion. Fact 2. Flown by Boeing 747 in pieces. When most people think about transporting boats, they imagine loading them onto cargo ships or hauling them on flatbed trucks. But the Waterworld production team had a much more unusual solution for getting their custom-built Trimarans to Hawaii. Both 60-foot vessels were completely dismantled into sections and loaded inside a Boeing 747-400 cargo plane, then flown across the Pacific Ocean to the film's location. This wasn't just Hollywood showing off with an expensive transportation method. It was actually a desperate race against time that forced the production into this unconventional choice. The problem started with the construction timeline. Normally, once Jeannot finished building a boat like this, they would simply place it on the deck of a freighter and ship it across the ocean, which typically required about a month of travel time from France to Hawaii. But the Waterworld production schedule was already incredibly tight, and losing an entire month just for shipping was completely unacceptable to Universal Pictures. The studio had already invested massive amounts of money into the project, and any delays would push costs even higher and potentially throw off the entire filming schedule that had been carefully coordinated around weather conditions and actor availability. So instead of accepting the delay, the production made the bold decision to dismantle both Trimarans into manageable sections and pack them into a jumbo jet. The components were carefully separated, loaded into the cargo hold of the Boeing 747-400, and flown directly to Hawaii between February and March of 1994. Once the pieces arrived at the dock, it still took another full month just to reassemble both boats and prepare them for filming, but that was still significantly faster than waiting for traditional ocean freight. This extraordinary logistics effort perfectly captures just how determined Universal was to keep Waterworld on schedule, even if it meant taking apart two massive custom sailing vessels and sending them halfway around the world on an airplane. Fact 3. 5-month construction miracle building. A high-performance racing Trimaran is no simple task, and under normal circumstances, constructing a vessel like the ones needed for Waterworld would take a full year from start to finish. But the production team behind Waterworld didn't have a full year to spare, and what happened next became one of the most unusual manufacturing stories in Hollywood history. In early August of 1993, Universal Pictures approached the French boat-building company Jeanneau with an urgent request. They needed not just one, but two custom 60-foot trimarans designed and built for the film, and they needed them ready for shooting in Hawaii by February of 1994. That gave Jeanneau roughly 5 months to complete both vessels, which was less than half the time normally required for this type of specialized construction. Here's where things get even stranger. When the contract was signed in August of 1993, the entire Jeanneau management team was away on vacation. Bruno Belmont, who was overseeing the project and would later go on to become marketing director for Lagoon, signed what he later described as a particularly challenging but lucrative contract while his bosses were out of the office. It was a bold move that committed the company to an almost impossible deadline. The pressure was enormous. Both trimarans needed to be built using the molds from Pierre Premier, the championship racing yacht that had just won the Route du Rhum race. One version had to be a fully functional racing vessel capable of reaching speeds around 30 knots, while the other needed to be packed with special effects gadgets, including a telescopic mast and transformation mechanisms. The teams at Jeanneau Techniques Avancées worked around the clock to meet the deadline, fabricating both boats simultaneously under incredibly tight time constraints. Against all odds, they pulled it off. Both trimarans were completed, disassembled into sections, and ready for transport to Hawaii within the 5-month window, proving that sometimes the most incredible feats happen when there's simply no other choice. Fact 4. Costner wasn't actually sailing. When you watch Kevin Costner confidently steering the trimaran through the waves in Waterworld, gripping the tiller and adjusting the sails with expert precision, it looks like he's truly commanding this massive vessel all by himself. But the reality behind those impressive sailing scenes was far more complicated and involved a hidden crew working in what one person described as a hellhole below deck. While Costner stood on the deck looking every bit the experienced mariner, the actual sailing was being done by a Jeanneau employee tucked away inside the bow of the boat, completely out of sight from the cameras. This crew member operated the trimaran using a joystick system similar to what you'd find in an airplane cockpit, remotely controlling all of the vessel's electronic winches and sailing functions while watching everything unfold on video screens. The setup was necessary because the trimaran needed to be piloted with real expertise during wide shots and aerial sequences where it had to look like Costner was genuinely sailing the boat alone across the open ocean. Wayne Burdick from Jeanneau North America described the hidden operator's workspace as incredibly challenging, saying the crew member was stuck in this confined space working the joystick like piloting a 747. The real helmsman and trimmer sat below deck, watching the sails and the boat's movements through video monitors, making all the necessary adjustments to keep the vessel moving properly while Costner performed his role on camera. According to reports, this innovative remote control system even included the ability to monitor and operate all the boat systems from below, giving the hidden crew complete control over the trimaran's sailing performance. The irony is that this seemingly ingenious setup never caught on in actual single-handed sailing, apparently because autopilot technology advanced so rapidly that having a hidden crew below deck became unnecessary, and placing winches and grinders near the tiller proved more effective for real-world sailors. Fact 5. Sandbag-powered transformation. One of the most ingenious engineering features of the Waterworld trimaran was its transformation mechanism, which relied on a surprisingly low-tech solution: sandbags. The production designers needed to create a boat that could dramatically transform from a makeshift floating home into a sleek racing sailboat right before the audience's eyes. And they accomplished this using weighted sandbags as counterweights hidden inside the vessel's mast structure. The system worked through a carefully balanced mechanical setup where sandbags were pulled up into the hollow mast as the transformation sequence began. When Kevin Costner's character triggered the transformation by operating just a few strategically placed levers on deck, these sandbags would shift position and use their weight to help raise the telescopic mast sections automatically. The same counterweight principle applied to the boom, which was completely concealed below deck when the Trimaran was in its trawler mode and needed to telescope outward when switching to sailing configuration. What made this system particularly clever was how it allowed the transformation to happen in a matter of seconds on screen without requiring complicated hydraulics or electronic systems that might fail during filming on the open ocean. The sandbags provided reliable, gravity-driven power that could work repeatedly, take after take. As the mast extended upward from its collapsed position, the furling mainsail and genoa would automatically unfurl as part of the same choreographed sequence, with the sandbag counterweights helping to control the speed and smoothness of the entire mechanical ballet. The combination of old-fashioned sandbag counterweights with the futuristic appearance of the Trimaran created an interesting contrast that production crews appreciated for its simplicity and reliability. While the transformation looked like advanced movie magic to audiences watching the film, the actual mechanism operating behind the scenes was based on basic physics principles that stagehands and riggers had been using in theaters for centuries. This clever blend of practical effects and straightforward engineering helped ensure that one of the movie's most visually striking sequences could be captured reliably during the challenging ocean-based production schedule. Fact 6. Hit 30 knots in real life. When most people think of movie props, they imagine fake vehicles that barely function or need to be towed around by hidden trucks and cables. But the racing version of Waterworld's Trimaran was the complete opposite. This thing was built to absolutely fly across the water, and it proved itself during sea trials in September of 1994 when it blasted past 30 knots, which translates to about 35 miles per hour on the open ocean. Now, 30 knots might not sound that impressive if you're thinking about cars or motorcycles, but for a sailboat, especially one that's 60 feet long and weighs as much as a small house, that speed is genuinely remarkable. To put it in perspective, most cruising sailboats top out around 6 to 8 knots, and even performance racing yachts usually max out in the low 20s. So when this Trimaran hit 30 knots during its trials, it wasn't just fast for a movie prop, it was fast by legitimate racing standards. The boat was launched on April 2, 1994, and from the moment it touched water, the crew knew they had something special on their hands. The designers at VPLP, the French naval architecture firm behind the project, had used the molds from Florence Arthaud's championship-winning Trimaran Pierre Premiere, so they already had a proven design. But seeing it actually perform at those speeds with a film crew aboard must have been both thrilling and slightly terrifying. What makes this even more impressive is that Universal Pictures wasn't trying to build the world's fastest sailboat. They just needed something that looked good on camera and could handle the rough waters off the coast of Hawaii. But because they insisted on using real racing yacht technology instead of building a cheap floating prop, they ended up with a vessel that could legitimately compete in professional regattas. In fact, after filming wrapped, the racing Trimaran was sold to American Sailor H. L. Enloe, who went on to race it competitively for years, proving that Hollywood accidentally built one of the most capable racing trimarans of its era. Fact 7. Weathered 500 years overnight. When the two gleaming white Trimarans arrived in Hawaii after their Boeing 747 cargo flight from France, they looked exactly like what they were, brand new, state-of-the-art racing yachts fresh from the Jeanneau shipyard. But that presented a major problem for the filmmakers because in the world of Waterworld, these boats were supposed to have been sailing the post-apocalyptic oceans for centuries, battered by endless storms and encrusted with the grime of a drowned planet. So the production design team, led by Dennis Gassner, faced an unusual challenge. They had to make these pristine vessels look like they'd survived 500 years of harsh maritime conditions practically overnight. The process they called weathering 500 years involved an intensive transformation that went far beyond simply slapping some paint on the hulls. The design team applied layer after layer of special treatments to create an authentic look of decay and age. They added artificial barnacles, rust stains, salt deposits, and discoloration to simulate centuries of exposure to seawater and sun. The crews painstakingly distressed every surface, chipping paint, adding dents and scratches, and creating patches that looked like makeshift repairs done with whatever scrap materials survivors could scavenge from the sunken world below. They even added streaks and stains to suggest years of leaking, weathering, and jury-rigged fixes that would have accumulated over generations of desperate ocean dwellers trying to keep their vessels afloat. The transformation was so thorough that the boats went from looking like sleek modern racing machines to appearing as if they'd been cobbled together from wreckage and held together with hope and desperation. This weathering process was essential to selling the film's vision of a world where everything was old, worn, and barely functional, where even the mariner's relatively advanced Trimaran had to look like it had been scraped together from the ruins of civilization rather than rolled off a factory floor. Fact 8. Costner nearly drowned on it. And making a movie on open water is dangerous enough on its own, but Kevin Costner came terrifyingly close to dying during one of Waterworld's most intense sequences. The scene required him to be strapped to the Trimaran's mast to survive a violent storm, and what was supposed to be a controlled stunt quickly turned into a genuine life-or-death situation that left the entire production shaken. The setup seemed straightforward enough. Costner would be secured to the mast while the boat was positioned in rough seas to capture the raw power of a storm battering the mariner and his vessel. But when the cameras started rolling off the coast of Hawaii, the pounding waves were far more powerful than anyone had anticipated. The water hit with such force that it knocked Costner unconscious while he was still tied to the mast, leaving him completely helpless as more waves continued to crash over him. With his body limp and his head submerged repeatedly, the star of the film was drowning right there on set, unable to free himself or even call for help. The crew immediately recognized the emergency and rushed to cut him free and pull him to safety. When Costner came to, he described the experience as a genuine near-death moment, the kind of thing that could have ended the production entirely and turned Waterworld into a tragedy rather than just a troubled shoot. This incident was just one of many dangerous moments during filming, but it stood out as the closest call for the film's leading man. Costner was on set for 157 days total, working 6 days a week throughout the grueling production, and this terrifying accident happened during a shoot that had already been plagued by weather delays, safety concerns, and waves that kept pushing the camera crew out of position. The storm scene incident became a stark reminder of just how real the dangers were when filming on the open ocean, and it's remarkable that Costner continued working on the film after such a frightening brush with death. Fact 9. Left to rot for 6 years. After Waterworld wrapped production in 1995, one of the iconic Trimarans faced an unexpected fate that seems almost fitting for a post-apocalyptic movie prop. The transforming version of the boat, the one with all the special effects and telescopic features that audiences saw in close-up shots, was shipped to Universal Studios Florida, where it became part of the Waterworld stunt show attraction. But instead of receiving the maintenance and care that such an expensive piece of movie history deserved, the Trimaran was left sitting in a lagoon at the theme park, slowly deteriorating under the Florida sun and humidity. For approximately 6 years, from the late 1990s into the early 2000s, this 60-foot vessel that had cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to build just sat there unmaintained. The boat that had been meticulously constructed in France, flown across the ocean in a Boeing 747, and featured cutting-edge transformation mechanisms with sandbag counterweights and telescopic masts, was essentially rotting away in standing water. Theme park visitors could see it from certain areas, but it wasn't being used or cared for in any meaningful way. The hull likely accumulated algae and weathering, the mechanical systems probably rusted, and the once impressive prop became a slowly decaying reminder of Hollywood's most expensive production disaster. The abandonment finally ended in March of 2004 when a private buyer purchased the deteriorating Trimaran from Universal Studios. By that point, the boat needed serious restoration work to become seaworthy again, assuming that was even the buyer's intention. Some reports suggest it was eventually restored and renamed the Ugly Sister, then moored in a harbor just south of San Diego International Airport, where it could be spotted on Google Earth for years afterward. The fact that such an elaborate and expensive movie prop was allowed to sit neglected for over half a decade shows just how quickly Hollywood moves on from even its biggest productions, leaving behind fascinating artifacts that tell their own strange stories. Fact 10. Renamed and raced. Competitively. After Waterworld wrapped production, the functional racing Trimaran didn't end up gathering dust in some forgotten storage facility or slowly deteriorating at a theme park. Instead, this 60-foot vessel got a second life that was arguably even more impressive than its Hollywood debut. American sailor H. Ellen Lowe, who goes by Lowe, purchased the Trimaran from Universal Studios and immediately saw its potential as a serious racing yacht. He renamed the boat Lowe Real and set about transforming it from a movie prop back into the high-performance racing machine it was originally designed to be. And Lowe wasn't just some casual weekend sailor either. This Texan sailor, who didn't even see the ocean until he was 18 years old, became absolutely dedicated to multi-hull racing and campaigned Lowe Real with the kind of intensity you'd expect from someone half his age. The Trimaran proved it still had what it took to compete at the highest levels of West Coast racing. In 2009 and 2010, Lowe Real captured Best Elapsed Time honors at the prestigious Newport to Ensenada International Yacht Race, which is one of the premier regattas on the West Coast and covers a challenging 125-mile overnight course from Newport Beach, California, down to Ensenada in Baja California, Mexico. What makes this achievement even more remarkable is that the boat was competing against purpose-built racing yachts that had never spent months being battered by waves during a Hollywood production. The Trimaran that had once carried Kevin Costner through post-apocalyptic waters was now crossing real finish lines ahead of boats that cost millions of dollars. And Lowe later upgraded to an even faster Trimaran called Mighty Merlot, but Lowe Real's racing success proved that Waterworld's Trimaran was far more than just a pretty prop built for the cameras. It was a legitimate, championship-winning sailing vessel that could hold its own against the best boats in competitive ocean racing. Fact 11. Sold for $26,000. After 30 years. After decades of racing glory and multiple owners, one of Waterworld's legendary Trimarans seemingly vanished from the sailing world only to resurface in the most unexpected way imaginable. The functional racing version of the boat, which had been purchased by American sailor H. Ellen Lowe and renamed Lowe Real, competed successfully in numerous regattas throughout the 2000s and 2010s, but eventually fell off the radar as ownership changed hands and the vessel's whereabouts became unknown to the sailing community and film enthusiasts alike. Then, in May of 2024, nearly 30 years after the Trimaran first graced movie screens, an advertisement appeared that stopped collectors and maritime fans in their tracks. The iconic 60-foot racing Trimaran from Waterworld was being offered for sale in Naples, Florida, located in the Gulf of Mexico. But this wasn't the pristine racing yacht that once commanded respect on the water. The boat had been completely dismantled into its individual components, disassembled like an enormous jigsaw puzzle with parts scattered and waiting for someone willing to take on a massive restoration project. The asking price was a jaw-dropping $26,000. To put this in perspective, a 60-foot racing Trimaran in working condition would typically sell for hundreds of thousands of dollars, making this asking price seem almost impossibly low. The boat that had cost hundreds of thousands to build in 1993, that had been featured in one of Hollywood's most expensive films ever made, and that had gone on to win prestigious sailing races, was now worth less than many used cars. According to reports from maritime publications, the seller eventually struck a deal with the buyer, though the identity of the person who acquired this piece of cinema history remains a mystery. The maritime community has been eager to learn who purchased the legendary Trimaran and what plans they might have for restoring this iconic vessel to its former glory. Fact 12. Combined grinder and tiller innovation. One of the most ingenious features of Waterworld's Trimaran was a sailing innovation that sounds almost too futuristic to be real. A combined grinder and tiller mechanism that allowed Kevin Costner's character to simultaneously steer the boat and trim the sails using a single integrated control system. For anyone unfamiliar with sailing terminology, the tiller is basically the lever you use to steer a boat, while the grinder is the winch system that adjusts the tension on the sails to control speed and direction. normally on a sailing vessel, especially a high-performance racing trimaran. These are two completely separate jobs that require different crew members working in coordination, with one person steering while another operates the winches to adjust the sails. But the Waterworld Trimaran merged these functions into one ergonomic station, creating what sailors at the time thought was a revolutionary single-handed sailing solution that would change the sport forever. The system was designed so that Costner could trim and steer at the same time, making the boat appear as though one skilled sailor could handle it alone in the post-apocalyptic world where crew members were scarce. This wasn't just Hollywood movie magic either. The mechanism actually worked on the functional racing version of the Trimaran. According to reports from the production, real helmsmen and trimmers who operated the boat during filming found the integrated system genuinely impressive, even if it took some getting used to. The idea was that by combining these controls, a solo sailor could make rapid adjustments without leaving the helm position, which would theoretically give them a significant advantage in both speed and maneuverability. However, despite all the excitement and discussion this feature generated in sailing circles when the film was released in 1995, the combined grinder-tiller design never actually caught on in the real world of competitive sailing. The reason, as sailing experts later explained, is that the advent of reliable autopilot systems made the innovation somewhat obsolete before it could gain traction. Additionally, having separate winches or grinders positioned near the tiller or steering wheel, but still operated by dedicated crew members, proved to be more effective in practice than trying to do both jobs simultaneously. Fact 13. Two completely different trimarans. When Universal Pictures commissioned the construction of the trimarans for Waterworld, they didn't just build one boat and call it a day. They actually created two completely different vessels that looked identical on the outside, but served entirely different purposes during filming. The first Trimaran was built as a genuine high-performance racing yacht, designed to handle the demanding sailing sequences shot on the open ocean off the coast of Hawaii. This wasn't just a prop that looked fast, it was the real deal, capable of reaching speeds over 30 knots, which is around 35 miles per hour on the water. When the crew needed distant shots of the mariner's boat slicing through waves or dramatic sailing scenes that required actual speed and maneuverability, this racing version was the one they used. It had to be strong enough to handle rough seas, fast enough to look impressive on camera, and seaworthy enough to keep the film crew safe during the notoriously difficult ocean shoots. The second Trimaran was a completely different beast altogether. This version was designed specifically for close-up filming and special effects work, and it came loaded with gadgets and mechanisms that the racing version didn't have. This was the transforming boat that audiences see in the film, converting from its trawler mode with the egg beater windmill into a sleek racing sailboat with the telescopic mast rising up and sails unfurling automatically. While this version could technically sail after its transformation was complete, it was nowhere near as capable as its racing twin. The added weight of all the special effects rigging, the telescopic mast system, the hidden boom mechanism, and the cameras mounted throughout the vessel meant it was much slower and handled poorly compared to the pure racing design. Essentially, one boat was built for performance and the other was built for Hollywood magic, and each one excelled at its specific job during the production. Fact 14. Built by future lagoon founders. The two trimarans used in Waterworld weren't just movie props thrown together by a Hollywood effects team. They were actually constructed by one of France's most respected yacht builders, and the person overseeing their creation would go on to shape the luxury catamaran industry for decades to come. Bruno Belmont directed the construction of both vessels at Jeannot Techniques Avancées, the advanced technologies division of Jeannot, which was already well known in the sailing world for building high-performance racing yachts. What makes this connection particularly fascinating is that Belmont would later become the marketing director of Lagoon, a brand that has since grown into one of the largest and most prestigious catamaran manufacturers in the entire world, producing luxury cruising catamarans that are sold and sailed across every ocean on the planet. At the time of Waterworld's production in 1993, Lagoon was actually a division within Jeanneau, specializing in multi-hull vessels, which is exactly why they were the perfect choice to build Kevin Costner's futuristic Trimaran. The contract was signed in early August of 1993, while the entire Jeanneau management team was on vacation, which shows just how important and lucrative this deal was considered to be. Bruno Belmont took on the enormous challenge of delivering 2 fully functional 60-foot trimarans in just 5 months, a timeline that would normally be impossible since these types of vessels typically require a full year to construct properly. The fact that the same hands that built these Hollywood movie boats also went on to establish Lagoon as a household name in the yachting world adds an unexpected layer of legitimacy to Waterworld's Trimaran. These weren't just fake movie props designed to look good on camera. They were real, seaworthy vessels, built by craftsmen who understood performance sailing at the highest level, and the expertise gained from projects like this helped shape the future of an entire segment of the boating industry. Fact 15. Still visible on Google Earth. Long after Waterworld finished filming and the production wrapped up in 1995, one of the movie's most iconic props remained surprisingly accessible to fans around the world, not through museums or studio tours, but through satellite imagery on Google Earth. For many years following the film's release, the transforming version of the Trimaran, the one equipped with all the special effects and the dramatic telescoping mast, could be spotted by anyone with an internet connection, moored in a marina harbor just south of San Diego International Airport in California. This unexpected digital visibility turned the legendary movie vessel into something of a pop culture landmark that sailing enthusiasts and film fans could actually locate and view from space. The Trimaran's presence in San Diego wasn't entirely random, as the transforming version had been sold to a private owner after production ended and found its home in one of the marinas near Harbor Island. What made this particularly fascinating was that, unlike most major movie props that disappear into storage facilities or private collections never to be seen again, this 60-foot vessel remained out in the open where commercial satellite photography could capture it. Film buffs and Waterworld fans began sharing the exact coordinates online, creating an informal pilgrimage site for people who wanted to catch a glimpse of the famous boat without traveling to California. The Trimaran's distinctive tri-hull design and its weathered post-apocalyptic appearance made it relatively easy to identify among the other vessels docked in the area. For years, checking Google Earth to see if the Waterworld Trimaran was still there became something of a tradition among dedicated fans of the film. The boat's visibility served as a strange kind of reassurance that this piece of cinema history hadn't been destroyed or lost, and that somewhere in Southern California, Kevin Costner's futuristic sailing vessel was still floating peacefully in the real world, waiting for anyone curious enough to zoom in and take a look.